Hello, hello. Good afternoon, good morning. Seems like a very routine welcome, but who knows where everyone's coming from. Can everyone hear me? Just wanna, if someone can just say yes, that'd be great.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, so good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for attending day 4 of Event Technology Week. Super excited. I'm almost starting to feel like I'm going to miss everybody from this relationship that we've had. And I do want to thank all the folks that are on the call today. Katie, hello. Kelly, Laura, Malik, welcome. And so today I have the great pleasure of introducing to you Adam Briggs, who is the Senior VP of Operations at Conference Direct. He is the master of all things housing and in technology as well. I'm super blessed to have him as our speaker today. I clearly needed some water. I'm skipping my words today. He has a wonderful presentation for you today, but before we do dive in, a couple of housekeeping notes. Just as before, for those returning, make sure that if you have any questions, throw it into the Q&A panel that's part of the Zoom software. So enter it there and I'll help moderate that throughout the session as well. And also remember, if you do take a picture and post it on Twitter with hashtag ETW19, we can also see your side of this camera, I would say. But the best part is you do win $500. So a picture can be worth $500, which is really great. And tomorrow we do have one more day left. And for that, I would like to introduce you. And remember to sign up and share this with your industry colleagues as well. For tomorrow's session, we have, there we go. We have Patrick Blattner, co-founder of Indoor Labs. He's going to be talking about on-site data analysis. Really exciting session. There's a lot of cool technology that's going to be discussed there, so I'm super excited. All right, so without further ado, I am going to give my controls to Adam here. I'm going to convert into a host, and Adam, there you go. Just make sure we got that. Hi, Adam, you there?
Yep. Do you see my screen? I just switched it over.
Yep, ready to go.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time today. I did bring some water, so if I do end up getting hoarse, I'll pay a little direct care. So I just wanted to thank you, Darman, and the entire StreamPoint team for putting together Event Technology Week. I think in our industry, obviously face-to-face interaction is preferred and is the best way of educating, but we're also in a new world and everyone's busy, and it's important that we get education any way we can. And I think that ETW is a great new tool for us doing that. So thanks for putting this together and all your efforts to make this a success.
Appreciate that.
So what we want to talk about today is really room block management, how to be successful with it, identifying your goals, and what can be done to achieve your goals. So as Dharmesh mentioned, my name is Adam Briggs. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations with Conference Direct. And for those who don't know, Conference Direct is a global event services company, and we handle a wide range of services, one of which is housing that I manage. And we currently support events in housing anywhere from 100 people to 140,000 people and everything in between. So a wide range of different event types. As you can see, I don't wear a Pearl Jam t-shirt to work. We have a professional environment, but I thought that was kind of a fun, housing's a dry topic, so it's good to have fun once in a while. So the most important thing whenever you're trying to measure success is really getting down to the root of what your goals are. And for every event, every client, the goals that you have for your event are going to be different. So I really like the idea of distilling down your goals into really what the essence of what we're trying to accomplish is, and that is going to be different for every group. Usually, it falls along one of these lines. You're trying to mitigate your risk, whether that's attrition or trying to generate a positive attendee experience, increase revenue through concessions, assist with future planning. So for every client, you may have more than one goal, but it's really important before you get started in setting up a housing process that you identify what your goals are that you're trying to accomplish. And then from there, you can put forward the right path and plan to reach those goals, and then also judge your performance against, what you were trying to accomplish. One of the things that we like to do is work within what we call a housing life cycle. Admittedly, this is really well tailored for association annual meetings, but it's really good for any recurring meeting. Obviously, you can take out one of the bubbles if it's a one-time event. But really, we can do a session on any one of these bubbles in a half hour, and I have done that. But we're going to talk about all of these at a very high level today, and then certainly available to talk through anything in more detail after today. So again, the first goal is to really identify, or the first step is to really identify the goals that you're looking to accomplish. Once you've identified the goals for the meeting, then you can start to look at locations and site searches. From there, you move on to contracting, and we're going to go through all of these individually later on. Once you've contracted and found a venue, then you can start doing your website design. You get the website built, then you start marketing, communicating to the attendees about the housing process. From there, you're managing inventory, managing blocks. You have your event take place, the closeout, and then you start preparing for the next event if there is one. So it's all one life cycle, and we live through it every year or multiple times a year if you've got recurring meetings that are happening more frequently. So again, talking about goals, when we talk about increased revenue, for planners, that can mean a couple different things. There may be, if you've negotiated cash for comps, an incentive for you to grow your blocks because you'll earn more revenues in cash for comps. It could mean, if you've negotiated rebates or maybe free rental if you reach certain pickup numbers. It could be decreasing expense. Again, if you get free rental once you've reached, let's say, $5 million in room spend. Avoiding attrition. Attendee satisfaction is pretty self-explanatory, but you want to have a very easy experience for your attendees. You don't want them getting frustrated before they even arrive at the event. Increased awareness and generating awareness about the blocks is an important part of marketing, and then growing pickup. We have a client that's in San Francisco every year, and one of their big drivers in growing the blocks was getting access to different halls at Moscone. So for those that have ever done business in San Francisco, in order to get the premium halls, you need to demonstrate pickup numbers. So we have a client that we've been working with on a block growth strategy for a few years. Thankfully, they've just met the number, but that was required in order to get them where they needed to be space-wise in the Moscone Center. And like I said, you have different goals, and setting up these goals is what's going to allow you to plan for reaching them. So dialing into the site search piece, this varies a lot customer to customer. You'll have some customers that do like a 3-city rotation, and it's always those 3 cities. Others have the benchmark cities where they always have good attendance, and they want to make sure those in a rotation every year. We have other clients that they like to stay in the same city every year. And I think part of a strategy for being successful with your blocks is really identifying, are you in the right place? And what is the right destination for your program? Is it always domestic? Do you look international? And a lot of that is looking at your membership. Where are your members? If you're a scientific association, is there a new research facility overseas that it makes sense to locate to draw awareness to that? But looking at your membership, where you're going to draw well, financial considerations, obviously. If your members are very rate sensitive, looking at Los Angeles or New York, or more expensive cities, probably doesn't make sense. Looking at a rotation, there's a lot to be said for rotations because if you've got cities that always perform, there is a time savings for knowing the destination. But I would also encourage you to make sure that you're not afraid to RFP. It's a reality that there's complacency when any organization treats business as definite, and rates start to creep up. Service may suffer a little bit. So if you've typically been in one city for a long time, even if it's to keep them honest, I highly recommend to look at doing an RFP and to see what else is out there. We have a client that had a long-standing relationship with the city just this year, and the rates have started getting up. They were getting negative feedback on their surveys from attendees because of the rates experience, and it was also hotels started to contribute less and less to the blocks because they knew they were going to get the business anyway. So we did an RFP, and another city came in very aggressively, and they actually ended up moving after 10 years in this other destination. So. Not that you always have to move, but I would strongly encourage anyone, if you've been in the city for more than a few years, to see what is out there and to see if you're really getting the best offer from your current destination. Something else to think about doing is looking to the future and playing the economy. So just with anything, hotels, they want business. They want to get room blocks contracted, so they have definite business on the books. Now is kind of the opposite, but we have had a lot of success in the past with associations booking multi-years further out during down economies so they can lock in lower rates and take advantage of a lower economy to do that. You should also plan on forecasting growth though. So not just looking at what this year is going to look like or what next year is going to look like, is what are your future growth plans so you can contract appropriately. You always want to have protections built into the contract for, review periods for blocks, just in case you aren't growing the rate you thought you were or growing faster than you thought you would be. And then also looking at how the location that you select is going to impact your numbers. And that's not just on what, Honolulu will do for your attendance. That's also factoring in if a majority of your membership is East Coast based and you have a West Coast destination, you've always been, let's say, having an East Coast city, you need to think about how that affects your pattern. And there may be people that arrive a day earlier than typical or stay a day later because of travel considerations. Also, if you're picking a destination like Orlando and you have a bigger draw from people that might treat this as a vacation, it might make sense to prepare for more rooms pre and post to account for people that may want to arrive early and treat this as the first part of vacation with their family. So destination is really important from the experience that your attendees are going to get, how it drives your pickup, and then obviously the financial mechanics of the meeting as well. So once you've picked a destination or picked a few destinations that you have as finals, then you get into the contract phase. And this is really one of, if not the most important aspects of the housing process. And the reason for that is it doesn't matter how good, whether you're hiring an outside housing company or you're doing the housing yourselves, at the end of the day, your only protections are what's in your contract. So the housing company can manage the blocks to the best of their abilities, but something might come up, and unless you have protections built into your contract, at that point, it's really more a matter of you're at the mercy of the hotel in leveraging the relationships you've had. But that doesn't always get it done. So it's really important to pay attention to what might happen on the front end. The first issue people look at is attrition. And a lot of people, will look at the rate and saying, okay, I'm having a 20% allowable attrition, so I need to pick up 80% of my rooms. And they just leave it right at that. Now, there's some people that don't put any attrition in at all, meaning they have to pick everything up. But most people, low-hanging fruit, they'll put in a attrition rate of, let's say, 80% or 20% allowable. But what they forget to factor in is the next point you see here, which is the calculating that attrition cumulatively versus night by night. So an area that you can get into a lot of trouble is if the attrition is not either doesn't mention it or mentions it specifically as night by night. You may pick up 130% of your peak nights, but hardly any of your shoulders, and then you could find yourself paying attrition. Whereas if you calculate it cumulatively, then it's going to look at your total pickup regardless of room nights. So that's an important distinction when you look at attrition to make sure that you're putting in your contracts. Also, making sure that you have strong audit clauses so that the rooms that are found in the audit are credited towards your attrition. You can also look at negotiating attrition based on actual profit instead of total rate as a way of drawing down your exposure there. So there's a lot you can do with attrition besides just having an attrition clause in your contract. Another valuable tool from a housing perspective is negotiating a shortened cutoff, or if the cutoff does need to stay at 3 to 4 weeks, having in a clause that allows for you to continue to sell inventory if there's rooms available or rooms still available in the block. That will allow you to keep maximizing your pickup. Every event's different, but typically we find a lot of action within the last month, which in most hotel contracts, you're blocked from really managing. So this is going to depend a lot destination to destination, but that's something else that you want to really strive to negotiate. Having a lowest rate clause is also really important. Some cities more than others, but if there's cities, then we'll get into some of the threats on blocks in a little bit. If there's some cities that have a lot of competition, having that's important. Comp accrual rate, cash for comps is important. Also, acts of God and or government is another one. Going back a couple of years, you remember the bathroom bills. A lot of the acts of God clauses in contracts weren't robust enough to address government legislation. The next piece is really going to be when we talk about the website design and setup. So, there's a lot of housing platforms out there. Passkey is a legacy platform that's been around for a long, long time. Reziat is a new platform. MeetingMax is the platform. But you really want to make sure that whatever tool you're using for booking is secure, that it's up to date with all levels of compliance, whether that's GDPR, the European regulation, PCI, which is credit cards. And then something that's important for us domestically is the CCPA, which is the California Consumer Protection legislation. That's going into effect in 2020, but that's going to impact quite a bit domestically. You want something that's modern, that's easy to navigate and intuitive. You want to make sure your brand is first and foremost visible. I've seen a lot of housing sites that were out there that the housing company had a bigger logo than the client. And that's not what you want. You want to have your brand front and center, have it be an extension of your event website. Also, we're in a mobile world, so you want to have responsive design. You want something that people can book a room on their phone, and that's really important as well. And then for maximizing your pickup, making sure that the housing system is integrated in some way to your registration platform to make it a seamless process for attendees. So once you've got your site up and running, it's important to put together a marketing strategy. One of the biggest failings that I see in event marketing is there's no centralized marketing strategy. You've got membership that's doing their own thing, exhibits is doing their own thing, and then the attendees are kind of an afterthought. It's really important to look at your entire communication strategy and what the messages are and the goals are for each audience, and timing it appropriately. If you're sending 3 different emails a day to people, they're going to start tuning out because they're getting overwhelmed with emails. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the frequency in which you're sending these, and you're not sending, even I think daily is too much, but more than 1 or 2 a week, I would say, is probably the max of what I would recommend. So you want to make sure you're looking at the timing of the different groups and what the message is for each group. The message that you send to your exhibitors is going to be different than the message that you send to attendees. So really fine-tuning that message. And then the method, we've moved away from cans with string. There we go. And it's really a social world now. I thought that yesterday's talk was fantastic in addressing the importance of engaging socially and through word of mouth as the most effective ROI for your communication dollar. So email is still king in terms of, what the bulk of communication is now. But I think that anyone that's not addressing social is doing so at their detriment. So when we talk about block management, we addressed some of these before. Anyone that's doing housing, whether again it's done internally, whether it's through the hotel, the bureau, a housing company, you want to make sure that you're monitoring this on a daily basis. And it's not just about looking at the peak night and seeing how many rooms you picked up. What you really need to be looking at is pace. How are you trending to pace? Look at the bell curve. And, again, is the pickup happening evenly according to that bell curve that you established? Do block adjustments need to happen? And this should be done on a daily basis. And you should be doing reporting. You should also look at any program changes. A frequent challenge that happens is that whoever is doing, content will make adjustments to the program without considering how that might impact your pickup. So this is especially important when you talk about, the closing reception or the closing session. If people realize that the program got cut in the end or the beginning, it might change their arrival patterns, which may end up throwing off your shoulder nights and could put you in a financial situation. So always make sure that you're communicating that program appropriately with all parties. Also looking and paying attention to acts of God or government. If there's a hurricane season in Florida or the Caribbean, looking ahead and seeing, weeks away, is there a potential risk? If your group doesn't cross picket line, paying attention to labor situations. That happened to us last fall in San Jose with some strikes and a client. So you need to make sure you pay attention to that. Again, we talked about the bathroom bill, and then just overall compression. If you're monitoring your pickup, that's important, but you should also be in active communication with your hotel to make sure that that you have a good understanding of what the hotel's looking like occupancy wise, because you might find that 60 days before arrival, you sell out. If you're not up to speed on what the hotel's doing, you may not be aware that they may already be sold out. So getting ahead of the game and adding rooms, if you think you have a chance of selling at the block before the hotel can sell out through transient or through other groups. Same thing with the city. Paying attention to what the compression looks like in the city is important, and that's going to help alleviate any stress you might have as you start to fill your blocks. It's going to allow you to be more proactive. So when we talk about filling your blocks, there's really two different, obviously, drivers. You've got attendees, and then you've got your sub-blocks. And I'm going to specifically speak to exhibitors, but this can also be, if you're talking about youth sports, it could be teams, it could be other groups. But sub-blocks are really your low-hanging fruit when it comes to block management. And why do I say that? Well, if you have a successful campaign to an attendee, you're going to get 1 or 2 rooms. And let's say you're going to get 6 to 10 room nights. For every exhibiting contact that you convince to use your housing solution or to book in your block, you're then going to get 10 to 50 to 100 plus rooms, and then you're talking hundreds of room nights. So for every conversion, you're going to have a much greater impact. So this example I gave about our client in San Francisco, that was our big driver for them, is we identified that their exhibitor participation in the blocks was very low. So we put together an exhibitor marketing effort, an exhibitor communication effort. We did things such as increasing the visibility of the housing options in the new exhibitor packets, increasing the visibility in the communications for repeat exhibitors. We also walked the exhibit floor and met with each exhibiting company that booked through housing to thank them and get their feedback. But we also met with the exhibiting companies that did not book with housing. And for those, we found out reasons why. And most of them, it was a matter of either they didn't know, it was a new person that was booking it. They may have been receiving some concessions from the hotels directly. So it was just a matter of convincing our client that if we give them the same concessions they're getting now, they're going to book in the block, and it's going to increase the other concessions and the space they were looking for there. So the exhibitor piece is really important in terms of it having a big impact on your block pickup. And again, that's again, the low-hanging fruit. Certainly, you don't want to neglect the attendees either, and it's important to communicate with them and increase the percentage of attendees booking your block, but you're going to get more bang for your dollar in terms of, or your effort, going and convincing exhibitors and sub-blocks to book in your blocks. So talking a little bit about threats, and just a funny little anecdote on this one. In my first draft of this slide, I actually had a picture of Jack Sparrow, Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean. And as I was reading the deck, I realized that it says trademark and copyright violations. So I thought I might not tempt the fates with that one. So we did a last minute change on this one. So hopefully this pirate works for you. I had the great pleasure of being on a panel with the Apex work group on housing piracy. So there's some great tools on that site that I'll be happy to share with you. We created this whole toolkit for planners on how to address housing piracy. But it is a real threat to your blocks. It varies city to city and event to event. But if your event is high exhibitor or high trade show, you're gonna you're going to probably have a housing piracy affect your groups, and it's going to vary client to client. The challenge is once the cat's out of the bag, it's going to be an every year thing. We find that these piracy companies end up closing up shop and opening up shop, nightly. So there have been, some litigations that have been on record. I believe there's been one win, but even that, it's more of a moral victory because they just closed up shop, so there's no real financial win, I don't believe. But this can be a real threat to your block. So what we found, the most important piece, interestingly enough, is that we found the piracies, the biggest losses, yes, the financial loss, but for planners, it was most important was the appearance that the negative impact or negative appearance it brought to the meeting. So people, even though it wasn't the planner's fault, there was a perception that the exhibitors held it against the event that had happened. So really, the best tools for fighting housing piracy are educating your attendees and members, over communicating with them about the risk of these companies, and notifying them if there is a company that's targeting your people once you find out about it. Sending a cease and desist can help, but it doesn't, unless they're glaringly violating your trademark or copyrights, there's not going to be a ton of teeth behind it. Also, we've had success working with hotel partners. So these piracy companies, and I put air quotes, the legitimate ones that actually have rooms they're selling, because there are pirates that actually fake inventory, and there's no room waiting for people. It's just they're stealing from them. But the quote unquote legitimate ones, they're getting rooms from wholesalers. So if you find through an audit people that booked with the housing piracy, they can trace back where that pirate company got the inventory. And then the hotel can work with the wholesaler to correct the issue, and then put them on a list to watch out for the future, for future threats.
Hey,
Adam, we're going to pick up the pace a bit here. Yeah.
So just a quick note. So the resource, if you share it with me, I can share it with the team, with all the attendees on the follow-up email. So that'll be great.
Perfect.
And the second thing is there's a notification of HubSpot on your screen. You just want to click on that.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries.
Perfect. Excellent. So we're going to move on a little more quickly. I know we're running a little bit short on time here. So other threats to your blocks, OTAs, online rates. This is really where the lowest rate clause comes in, because any housing effort worth its salt is going to be monitoring these other OTAs to make sure that the rates that in your contract are lower than the rates being offered online. That's a frequent refrain from attendees, is they don't book on the block because they're able to find a lower rate elsewhere, which does hurt the reputation of the event. You want to make sure you're doing that. Airbnb is really, I would say it's a varied threat. It varies event to event based on your demographics and also city to city. This is an evolving threat because there's a lot of local legislation that is being put in place to help to limit the number of Airbnb units and how they're used from city to city. So everyone's very afraid of Airbnb, and it can impact your events. But I think it's an evolving threat because attendee behavior is changing, and there are attendees that are more likely to use Airbnb. But there's also legislative changes at the local level that might mitigate this risk as well. And it does vary city to city. We can talk more about that in question at the end if you'd like. I wanted to talk through the event closeout process because, and we'll go through this fairly quickly, but the event closeout process is really where most of your activity happens from a housing perspective. So, starting at the cutoff date is when you're getting the initial rooming list to the hotel. You're sending out confirmation numbers. If you've managed housing in an external system, you're sending confirmation numbers to the attendees. You're setting up, you've got your cancellation policies, and you're assigning your resources and who's handling housing at the event. So the cutoff date, the big driver there is making sure your hotels get the rooming list and you're getting the confirmation numbers back to attendees so that they can manage their reservations. The next big milestone typically is 2 weeks prior to the event. And this is where we would recommend conducting a pre-audit. So every event, you should do an audit at the event, and we'll talk about that with comparing your registration list to your in-house list. The pre-audit's important because it just gives you a better understanding of where you stand. and it's going to minimize the amount of work you have to do at the event. So typically with the pre-audit, we'd recommend sending the hotel your registration list, and then they'll run it through. Most hotels have an automated system where they can cross-check, and then that'll get a bulk of the rooms allocated appropriately to your block. I'd also at this point, cross-check the reservation lists with prior attendees, making one final push from a communications perspective, monitoring cancellations and applying cancellation penalties if applicable. If possible, always continue selling through arrival. There's also some great tools if you are sold out and you don't want to continue, you don't want to add another contract or you don't want to sign an overflow. There are tools. We have a partner, ARES, that offers some post-cutoff booking options, which have been really helpful for some of our customers as well. And then when we talk about at the event, daily reporting from hotels on the cancellations and no-shows, extending out VIPs or suites. Believe it or not, we get a lot of on-site requests for rooms typically from people that register for the event, book their airfare, but forgot to book a room. So, there's going to be those requests that you should, even if your hotel's sold out, it's a good idea to find out what hotels in the area have inventory so that you can accommodate those requests. Resolving check-in issues that might happen, pre-checking suites to make sure that any VIPs checking in are going to have a good experience. And then after your peak night, we typically recommend doing the audit at that point to make sure that you're getting full credit for all the rooms booked outside the block, and then continuing that daily reporting. For the event closeout, working with those audit results to calculate your final pickup, your concessions earned, rebates, reconciling master bills, and then if you are doing rebates, invoicing the hotels for those amounts, and then preparing your final numbers. What I do recommend is shortly after the meeting having a post-con. Now everyone has post-cons, but to make your post-con most effective, I also recommend taking notes along the way. So what I would recommend, there's great tools like Evernote and others where from day one, just have a log of issues that come up, because if you wait till the very end for your post-con, you're likely not going to remember what happened 6 months before as a challenge. And this is not just housing, this could be any aspect of your meeting, but I highly recommend using a centralized tool, again, like an Evernote or something similar, where you and your team can jot down ideas or challenges that occurred so that you have a detailed list to review at the post-con. Far too often, you'll have a post-con and people are just trying to think of stuff off the top of their head. They're forgetting 90% of what occurred, and even what they do remember is not exactly the same as what they experienced. So highly recommend using a tool like that to be able to develop those the list of things that you'd like to change or suggestions. And it's a good tool to have anyway, because you could be on an event or at a session like this or out with somebody and get a good idea and just taking that note rather than letting it evaporate into the ether. So, on the post-con, you want to review the execution. Did you meet the goals that you set up at the beginning? Identify, were there any surprises or things that you hadn't considered that needed to be addressed? Find solutions for any challenges that did occur. Identify areas for improvement for the next year. Set up the timelines for your next events. Again, take notes throughout, and then again, develop goals in the plan for achieving those goals for the next event that you're putting on. So again, we went through a lot of detailed content. I hope you found it helpful. I'm available and would love the opportunity to talk through any of these items in more detail, or if you have a specific situation that you'd like to get some insight on, I'm happy to help with that as well. But thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, that's awesome, Adam. A lot of insight. I learned a lot of new stuff myself, which is great. So any questions from everyone that's attending right now? We're open for questions. And while we're waiting for questions, just as a recap, we'll send out a recording of this webinar tomorrow. And in that email, we'll also have additional articles and whatnot, and some of the resources that Adam has spoke about. We'll attach that as well. So you'll have that for you. Okay. All right, if there's no other questions, feel free to connect with Adam directly at adam.briggs@conferencedirect.com. And we look forward to tomorrow's session about data analytics on the show floor. Really exciting topic. And until then, enjoy your lunches, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. I'm very excited. Last day.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, there is one question. Sorry. Would be interested
yeah.
in watching a webinar on each of these topics in more detail. Oh, that's a great question. Okay. We will look at that. Thank you.
Event Technology Week number 2.
Yeah, fall edition for sure. Great. Thanks all. Thanks, Adam. Really appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.